We can get them in the back. Good to go. All right, good morning, everybody. We're here this morning to announce charges in the shooting that killed a 16-year-old and injured two other teenagers in the 1200 block of West Thorndale on January 31st, 2004, near Senn High School. I'm joined here today by Chief of Detectives Antoinette City, Deputy Chief of Detective Kevin Bruno, and Area 3 Detective Commander Rodney Hill. We're also joined by Detectives Brian Schmidt and Chris Pajelski. The work they did in this investigation was amazing. They brought this to a timely close. That's why we're standing here today, because of two felony counts of attempted first-degree murder. The 17-year-old is being charged as an adult. The 14-year-old has also been charged with two additional felony counts of aggravated battery with the discharge of a firearm. These charges would not have been possible without the hard work of the officers and detectives involved. From the responding officers administering emergency medical aid and preserving evidence to Detective Schmidt and Pajelski diligently sifting through evidence to identify the two offenders. We were committed to bringing justice in this case. We did this for the two surviving victims and the family of the teen who lost his life. I also want to thank the community members who came forward with information that helped us throughout this investigation. As I said before, as a police department, we can't do this alone. Having the help from the community always helps, and they stepped up. I also want to acknowledge the Senn High School community and the Edgewater community. This was a traumatic incident for not just those directly involved, but those who knew the victims, went to school with the victims, or witnessed the aftermath of the shooting. Following the shooting, our Crime Victim Services unit stood up an emergency assistance center to support those affected by this shooting. For those who were unable to visit the center, our Crime Victim Service unit is available still at this time. The number is 312-745-6340. Again, 312-745-6340. We can help you. They can help you with resources if absolutely necessary. So once again, I just want to say before I introduce Chief Ursetti to give you an update on the investigation, the people that you see standing here to my left were instrumental in making sure that these violent individuals were brought to justice. Violent criminals have to be held accountable. That's from robberies, shootings, to homicides. If we're not holding them accountable, they become more brazen. They continue to act in this manner. I can guarantee, as I guaranteed you the night that this shooting occurred, that the Chicago Police Department will do everything in its power to hold violent offenders accountable. With that, I'm going to introduce Chief Ursetti of the Bureau of Detectives.
Good afternoon, Antoinette City, Chief, Bureau of Detectives. On January 31st at approximately 3:36 p.m., two 16-year-olds and a 15-year-old were struck by gunfire on the 1200 block of West Thorndale. One of the first things to highlight about the course of this investigation is the immediate response of first responders on the scene to preserve life and evidence. When officers first arrived, they observed CFD personnel rendering aid to 3 victims. Officers used their training to provide life-saving techniques and to do everything possible to minimize the impact of this tragedy. Tragically, one of the 16-year-old victims, a student at Senn High School, was transported to St. Francis Hospital, where he was later pronounced deceased. The other victims received treatment at Illinois Masonic and also at St. Francis. Officers were also able to secure the crime scene, even with a large crowd. ensuring that locations with items of evidentiary value were preserved and processed by evidence technicians. Detectives obtained information about the vehicle used by the offenders, a gray Honda HR-V with Florida registration plate that was stolen on January 29th, along with the direction of flight of the vehicle. Using video, they were able to monitor the vehicle and ultimately recovered the vehicle parked on the 4100 block of North Kenmore Avenue on February 2nd and processed it as part of the investigation. Video also showed the two individuals who parked there and exited the vehicle. As we consistently see in investigations that are solved as quickly as this case, the community was instrumental in providing information that ultimately resulted in the positive identification of the offenders. On February 20th, both offenders were placed into custody. This morning, felony charges were approved. We heard earlier, but I will say again, our one offender who was 14 years old was charged with 1 count of first-degree murder, 2 counts of attempt first-degree murder, and 2 counts of aggravated battery discharge of a firearm. And our 17-year-old offender was charged with 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempt first-degree murder. From the start of this investigation, all who were involved were wholly dedicated to ensuring justice for these victims and the community affected by this violence. I want to acknowledge the entire Area 3 team that you see here today, Commander Rodney Hill, but especially want to thank the lead detective on this case, Detective Brian Schmidt, and Detective Chris Pajowski, who worked tirelessly to canvass, interview, and recover video that was key to obtaining charges. This type of work demonstrates the commitment of our members to protecting our communities and ensuring this type of violence does not continue to impact families and residents. Thank you.
With that, we'll take any questions that you may have.
Was this part of the shooting? I know there were some speculations in the past, but now that you guys have arrested these individuals, what can you say about that?
Would you like to take that?
What we'll say is that we believe there was an altercation that was involved in this.
Good morning, Cardi Burns, CBS Channel 2. Can you clarify how you were able to track them down? I know you said you sifted through evidence.
That would be the detectives, and I'll have Chief or City explain.
Sure thing. And again, it really is a great credit to the team that you see here today. There is a lot to go through. I'm going to say video evidence, and not just from the scene, but once we were able to identify what the vehicle was, we were able to track that. We also use other resources. Again, there's private video, there's pods, there's license plate readers. All of these things help us understand the movements, which were instrumental to this investigation. And then, as I had mentioned, the community was huge. We had a number of people who gave us information. Not any one bit was maybe enough, but taken together was able to help us put this together.
Good morning, Michelle Gallardo with ABC7. Has it been determined if both of these individuals opened fire on the victims? And if so, can you also just speak about, in what you mentioned about holding them accountable, how is the decision made when we have minors involved to charge them as an adult or not?
Sure, it's a great question. And what I will say is, when you're asking how were we able to basically obtain these charges, I think is maybe what your first question is.
Well, the first one was if they both opened fire. And
Okay.
The second one.
Well, again, as the charges reveal, they were the ones who were responsible for this shooting. So we are, the charges match their actions, if that makes sense. And then in terms of how we're able to obtain charges, and again, because they are minors, there are certain age limitations in terms of when you can be charged as an adult or not. So again, that is with the discretion of the state's attorney's office. If you would like more information, you may want to follow up there. But again, what you see that was put together here was an extensive amount of evidence that in and of itself was able to be presented to get these charges. And that really is what the great credit is here to everybody, is that they had to go out there. Obviously, we see the impact that this had on the community, especially when you're talking about young people. You're seeing this in a school community. to have resolution in this case as quickly as we did. Again, a great credit to the community as much as to the work of these detectives.
Patrick Fazio with NBC5. You mentioned actively an altercation led to the shooting. Did the suspects and the victims know each other?
I'm not going to say anything more, I guess, at this point about the altercation.
Were they students at the high school, the suspects?
No, these were not students at the high school.
They knew of each other or some sort of relationship?
There was a altercation between them, yes.
Next question. I'm guessing the one.
Hi, Sophie with the Senn High. Are you able to speak to any additional measures CPD has taken in building security around schools following the shooting and the one that happened?
Yeah. So immediately after that, and keep in mind, CPD, we do special attentions around schools all the time. Obviously, when we have an act of violence around the school, we pick that up. And we have a larger focus on that particular area because we worry about the possibility of a retaliatory shooting, retaliatory violence. So we make sure that we have vehicles in that area, making sure that we're following up on any possible threats. So we don't just reach out to the schools, but our Bureau of Counterterrorism is involved. We're looking at open social media. So all of these things that could affect violence that occurs in and around schools. So we continue to pay special attention to those locations.
So he asked my question, but it's just thinking about this, like 3 CPS students killed outside schools unless in the state of the league. It's hard to imagine, that this wouldn't be national news that had happened anywhere else. Why do you think these types of crimes continue to fly under the radar in Chicago?
Well,
When they involve kids?
Well, that's a great question. People have become desensitized to the level of violence that's going on in the city, and we cannot allow that to happen. The desensitization to this type of violence has led us not to pay much attention to it, and what we're not paying attention to are the victims and the families of these victims. And if we don't have the focus there, then we're not paying attention to the people who are truly affected by these violent crimes. So everyone that you see here, the men and women who are standing here today proudly for the justice that they brought for a family, that's what we're here to do. We're here to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. We're here to bring justice to those victims and those families of victims, so that they have a clear understanding that we're here for them. So, it's a great question, but we have to have a focus on the people who are being victimized by these violent crimes.
Jose Manuel from Telemundo, tomorrow will be a meeting at CPD that is going to discuss about removing police from the schools. What's your reaction on this?
My reaction is this: as the Chicago Police Department, that's outside of our control. Whatever decision is made there, it is no reflection on the great work that our police officers were doing in the schools while mentoring the children there. Those officers were trained to be in the schools. So if those officers are removed from the schools, CPD is going to continue to do what we've always done: protect our children, protect the street. When those kids are on their way to school during arrival time, we will have our officers present. We will have special attention in those locations, as well as dismissals. And if there's any threat of any violence or possibility of violence around those schools, we will still have special attention there. And the CPD officers, with the great work that they always do, will continue to do the same.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.